Good afternoon, and welcome to a look into the book The Population Bomb by Paul R. Ehrlich. American Public University System Senior Seminar presented by me, Rebecca Schwarzy. It's December 21st, 2017. In this slide, we have the summary. We're going to discuss about author Paul R. Ehrlich. We're also going to talk about the book. The book that he wrote was The Population Bomb. The book was written in 1968, so we're going to talk about the issues during that time that brought on the book. Also, we'll talk about present day. We'll do a comparison between 1968 and today, the different issues that he was concerned with compared to issues that we're still seeing, not to mention the predictions that he had throughout the book. What predictions came to light, which one were false, and then we'll have our conclusion. This is Paul R. Ehrlich. He is the author of The Population Bomb. This is a picture of him from 1974. He was born May 29th, 1932 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1953, he earned a bachelor's degree in zoology at the University of Pennsylvania. He later moved to Kansas, where he got his MA in 1955 from the University of Kansas, and he continued on at the same university, earning his PhD in 1957. Ehrlich had pursued long-term studies of the genetic structure and dynamics of natural butterfly populations. He did this right after completing his PhD, and he did this all the way up until he wrote The Population Bomb in 1968. He had a focus group on the investigation of how humans disturbed landscapes can be made more hospitable to biodiversity. In 1967, Ehrlich gave a speech in California, and during this speech he discussed overpopulation and the different theories that he had. And it was broadcasted on radio, which reached a lot of people, and there was several environmentalists that reached out to Ehrlich about his ideas on overpopulation and his theories, and encouraged him to write a book. And in 1968, he collaborated with his wife, and he actually wrote the book, The Population Bomb. The book was quite controversial. He discussed many different issues involving overpopulation throughout the world, to include the United States. And the reason why it was so controversial is because he believed in population control to prevent the future demise of the world. He believed that humans, especially in the United States, should limit how many children that families should have, and also even looking into sterilization. Ehrlich believed that human populations would grow to the point that all humans would end up starving to death because we could just not provide for the massive number that we were seeing during that time. The Population Bomb was published in 1968, and it discusses human overpopulation and the consequences that will arise from this. A lot of the stuff that he talks about within the book is the fact that natural resources are running out, human populations are growing to the point where mass starvations will occur. He also discusses how human population is a ticking time bomb that'll inevitably go off. It may not go off 10 years from now or 20 years from now, but if humans continue to use overabundance of natural resources and continue to just grow in number, then there just will not be enough food to sustain the human population. Prior to 1968, the United States had dealt with 2 world wars, a Great Depression, a potential nuclear fallout from Cuba. After World War II, baby boomers was a term that was coined because 76.4 million babies were being born between 1946 and 1964. This was a huge number, and it really made the author look at, where did these children in 20 years stand, because for each child they might have 2 to 3 kids, and then those 2 to 3 kids might have another 2 to 3 kids, and so on, and it just increases our numbers exponentially. We also had the Dust Bowl that occurred, and it was around the Depression era. It was where out west due to the climate, we had droughts, and a lot of the agriculture suffered from it. We also had the environmental movement that started to occur in the early 1960s. Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, definitely helped pioneer the environmental movement. She wrote the book that really opened up the discussion on DDT. DDT was a chemical that was used to as a pesticide. The pesticide actually had negative effects on human health and environmental health. Paul Ehrlich was studying genetics, and one of the things that he was studying at the time was the checker spot butterfly. And he really saw a population decline because of the use of the DDT. He started to look into the effects that human populations was having on the environment, and how overpopulation was really having a negative effect. He saw countries like India at the time was more just coming up and coming countries. They were really experiencing a lot of mass starvations at that time. With the current decline in agriculture in the United States, because right after the Great Depression and even some after that, we're starting to see, mass starvations here in the United States as well. In the population bomb, Ehrlich believed that India and China, due to their enormous size and the enormous amount of people that resided within these countries, would be experiencing the most deaths due to starvation. In 1968, India had 50% of their population living below the poverty line. In 2017, there's 21.9% of the population living below the poverty line. The country has developed and built industries and has grown exponentially. Even though the population continues to rise, India has seen major economic growth and actually is a huge player in the global marketplace today. Some of the issues that Ehrlich had predicted with human populations continuing to grow has come true, like biodiversity decreasing. CO2 emissions have risen in the past few years. That's just increased global warming. Deforestation threatens more species every single day and is pushing these species out of their habitats. As human populations grow, more natural resources are being used up. The population bomb has several issues within the book that, his predictions just have not come to light. Like mass starvations have not wiped out China or India. People are living longer because of medical science, not just populations aren't just growing because people keep over reproducing. Instead of, back in 1968 or above, when people would live, to their 50s or 60s, people now can live up to 80s, 90s, even into their hundreds. Limiting the number of children or sterilizations, we have seen in China where they stopped, limited the number of girls that they had, and now they have an issue today with not having enough girls to boy ratio. Today, people are more conscious of the environmental issues. We got green infrastructure, and people are practicing more sustainability. Awareness is a key issue that I'm sure back in 1968, Ehrlich just did not see that awareness because the movement had just started. But now there is more awareness, and there's more people getting involved. I just want to conclude on this presentation about the population bomb. I mean, it was written in 1968. The environmental movement was just starting. We have so many issues during that time with coming back from the wars and populations just, rising exponentially all over the world. The United States with the baby boomers, and then, Silent Spring opening up the dangers of DDT. Looking at all the hazards that surrounded, how people wasn't aware of the situations, it's easy to see a future that is grim and bleak. But we look today in 2017 and we see we still have, populations are rising, but people are living longer. We have biodiversity is still, an issue because we got deforestation and CO2 emissions are rising, and global warming is an issue, but more people are aware. We have more sustainability programs in place and green infrastructure, and I see a future that is much brighter than what Ehrlich's seen with the population bomb. And I believe that if we continue to educate and continue to practice more sustainability and to include green infrastructure, we're bound to see a much brighter future than what Ehrlich predicted. I just want to thank you all for coming out and listening to my presentation, and I hope that you all enjoyed it and you'll take the time to read The Population Bomb by Paul R. Ehrlich. Thank you.